The rattling started at 11:43 p.m., just as Courtney Hall was cutting through the employee lot behind Mel's diner. She knew this route by heart, had been taking it for 2 years, ever since she'd started closing shifts to pick up the extra $1.50 an hour. The old Hartman building loomed across the street, all boarded windows and graffitied concrete, a corpse of the city's manufacturing boom that everyone had learned to walk past without seeing. But you couldn't walk past chains rattling. Even faint, even muffled behind brick and plywood, the metallic scrape cut through the parking lot silence like a knife dragging across a tin roof. Courtney stopped mid-stride, her rubber-soled work shoes squeaking against oil-stained asphalt. She pulled her phone halfway out of her apron pocket, the cracked screen glowing in the darkness. Nothing now. Just the hum of the interstate overpassed 2 blocks down and a siren wailing somewhere in the West End. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe her brain was creating drama after 9 hours of handling drunk college kids and businessmen who thought tipping 15% made them generous. She started walking again, faster this time, keys already in her hand. She couldn't afford to linger, not in this neighborhood, not at this hour. $1,633 in her checking account. Rent was $1,250. That left $383 for groceries, the car insurance payment she'd pushed back twice, and the $100 she'd promised her Aunt Diane for the water bill. The math played in her head like a song she couldn't turn off. The sound came again, sharper this time, metal on metal, followed by something else. A low groan, almost animal, the kind of sound that came from a body, not a machine. Every survival instinct Courtney had learned growing up in the Eastbrook projects told her to keep moving. Mind your business. Don't be a witness. Don't become a statistic. She'd learned that at 14 when her cousin Trey got shot on a corner, and nobody who saw it would talk to police because talking meant becoming a target. But her feet had stopped moving. Her thumb hovered over the emergency call button, the blue light washing over her dark skin. And then she heard it clearly, a voicemail speaking what sounded like Korean, sharp and commanding, followed by the wet crack of something hard hitting flesh. Another groan, weaker, broken, desperate. Jesus, Courtney whispered into the empty lot, her breath fogging in the November cold. This ain't my problem. This is absolutely not my problem. She stared at her phone. 11:47. If she called the cops, they'd take forever to show up in this neighborhood anyway, and they'd want her name, her number, maybe even bring her down to the station. She'd miss her morning shift tomorrow. Mel would have her final write-up ready before she could explain. And for what? Some deal gone wrong in an abandoned building. Gang business. Drug business. Definitely not her business. She should go home. Should drive her beat-up Civic back to her studio apartment, heat up leftover rice, and forget she'd ever heard chains rattling in the dark. That's what any sensible person would do. But Courtney had never been as sensible as she was stubborn. Her mama used to say she'd inherited her grandmother's iron spine along with her high cheekbones. That woman had marched in '63 with a busted ankle and raised 4 kids working double shifts at a laundromat. Courtney barely remembered her, but she remembered the stories about a woman who helped people even when it cost her. This is crazy, she muttered, shoving her phone back in her apron. Absolutely crazy. But her feet were already moving toward the gap in the chain-link fence, the one the city had fixed 3 times, but that always got cut open again within a week. Welcome back to the channel. Before we find out who is chained in the dark, comment below what time it is where you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The basement stairs descended into pure darkness, the kind that swallowed the weak glow from Courtney's phone screen after just 3 steps. She kept one hand on the concrete wall, feeling her way down, her work shoes scraping against grit and broken glass. The air got colder with each step, thick with the smell of rust and something else, copper, sharp and wrong. Blood. The rattling was louder now, rhythmic, desperate, chain against metal, someone pulling hard against restraints. Courtney's hand found the bottom of the stairwell, and she swept her phone light across the basement. The beam caught old machinery first, industrial relics covered in dust and graffiti. Then it found him. He was chained to a support pillar in the center of the room, arms pulled behind him, wrists bound with heavy links that looked like they belonged on a ship anchor. His white dress shirt was torn and soaked through with blood, the fabric clinging to his chest. His face was a mess, split lip, Swollen eye, bruises blooming purple across his jaw. But it was the tattoos that made Courtney's breath catch. Ink covered his neck, disappearing under his collar, crawling up to his jawline in intricate patterns that looked like dragons or demons. She couldn't tell which in the dim light. His eyes locked onto hers, dark and alert despite the beating he'd clearly taken. He said something in Korean, urgent, almost a growl. Courtney took a step back, her spine hitting the stairwell wall. I can't understand you. He switched to English, his accent thick but clear. Go, now they come back. Who comes back? Go, his voice cracked with desperation, and he jerked against the chains hard enough that the pillar groaned. You should not be here. They will kill you. They will kill us both. Courtney's mind raced through her options. Call the cops, too slow. Run, leave him to whatever was coming, or do something monumentally stupid. Her eyes swept the basement again, and the phone light caught something in the corner. A length of rusted pipe, about 3 feet long, leaning against an old workbench. I'm not leaving you here, she heard herself say, already moving toward the pipe. You are insane, he said, but there was something else in his voice now. Hope maybe, or disbelief. Yeah, I'm getting that a lot tonight. Courtney grabbed the pipe, felt its weight, heavy enough. She moved to the pillar where a massive padlock held the chains. Turn your head, shield your face. He obeyed without question, and she swung the pipe down with everything she had. The sound of metal on metal rang through the basement like a gunshot. The lock held. She swung again, her arms burning, her breath coming in gasps. Again. On the 5th hit, something gave, the lock mechanism bent, and with one more strike, the shackle popped free. The chains fell away, and he collapsed forward onto his hands and knees, gasping. For a moment, Courtney thought he might not be able to stand, but then he pushed himself up, slower than she expected, every movement deliberate. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, probably 6 feet, with blood dripping from a cut above his eye. Can you walk? Courtney asked, already reaching for his arm to help him. He pulled away from her touch, pride flashing in his eyes even through the pain. I can walk. Then we need to move, now. They made it halfway up the stairs when Courtney heard it, voices outside, speaking Korean, followed by the unmistakable metallic click of a car door opening. Then another, and another. The back, he said, gripping her shoulder to steady himself. There is a back exit. I don't know. I've never been in here before tonight. Then we find one. He pushed past her, moving faster now despite his injuries, and Courtney followed him back down the stairs. They crossed the basement at a stumbling run, her phone light bouncing wildly across walls and shadows. Behind them, the front door crashed open, heavy footsteps thundering across the floor above. He found a service corridor she'd missed, narrow and low, and they ducked into it just as flashlight beams swept across the basement from the stairwell. Someone shouted in Korean, angry, alarmed. More footsteps pounding down the stairs. The corridor ended at a rusted door with a push-bar exit. He slammed into it with his shoulder, and it gave way with a shriek of metal, spilling them both out into an alley behind the building. Cold air hit Courtney's face like a slap. Her car was 2 blocks away in the diner lot. Can you run? She gasped. He was already running. They sprinted through the alley, footsteps echoing behind them now, shouts getting closer. Courtney's lungs burned, her legs screaming from 9 hours on her feet followed by this insanity. They burst onto the main street and she grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the employee lot. Blue Honda there. She hit the unlock button and the Civic's lights flashed. They threw themselves inside. And Courtney jammed the key into the ignition with shaking hands. The engine turned over once, twice, come on, and caught. She threw it into reverse just as 3 men rounded the corner into the lot, running hard. Courtney floored it, the Civic fishtailing backward, then slammed the brakes and shifted into drive. The tires squealed as she accelerated out of the lot, blowing past the men, close enough to see their faces in her headlights, hard eyes, weapons visible under jackets. She took the first corner too fast, the Civic's suspension protesting, then the next, putting distance between them and whoever those men were. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. Beside her, the Korean man was breathing hard, his head tilted back against the seat, eyes closed. Blood was seeping through his shirt onto her passenger seat. When he opened his eyes and looked at her, there was something in his gaze she couldn't read. Gratitude mixed with something darker. Calculation, maybe. "My name is Sanchi," he said quietly, "and you just made a very dangerous enemy." Courtney's apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had been luxury in 1987 and was now just expensive. She half-carried Sanchi up the stairs, his weight heavy against her shoulder, leaving drops of blood on the concrete steps that she'd have to clean up later if she didn't want questions. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the keys. The door swung open to reveal exactly what her life was: a studio with a kitchenette that barely qualified as a kitchen, a futon that served as both couch and bed, and a bathroom so small you could sit on the toilet and wash your hands in the sink at the same time. Sanchi stumbled inside, and she locked the door behind them, throwing the deadbolt and the chain for whatever good that would do. He made it to the futon before his legs gave out, collapsing onto it with a grunt of pain. "First aid kit," Courtney said, more to herself than to him. "I've got somewhere." She was already digging through the cabinet under her sink, pushing aside cleaning supplies and old takeout bags until she found the white box with the red cross. When she turned back, Sanchi had his phone out, his thumb moving across the screen with practiced efficiency despite his injuries. "What are you doing?" "Calling for extraction." His voice was steady now, controlled, back to whatever he was when he wasn't chained in a basement. "My people will come for me. I will make sure you are compensated for your help tonight." Compensated, like she was a cab driver who'd given him a ride. Courtney set the first aid kit down harder than necessary on the coffee table that was really just a milk crate with a board on top. "Your people, the same ones who had you chained up and bleeding." "That was not my people. That was," he stopped, his jaw tightening. "It is complicated." "Uncomplicate it, because I just made myself a target for whoever those men were, and I'd like to know why." Sanchi looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him calculating, weighing how much truth to give her. "I run an organization, a syndicate. Someone inside betrayed me, sold me to rivals. I do not know who yet, but my lieutenant, Kwon, he is loyal. He will come." He pressed the phone to his ear, and Courtney heard it ring once, twice. Then a male voice answered, rapid Korean that even she could tell was urgent, almost frantic. Sanchi responded in the same language, his tone sharp and commanding. The conversation lasted maybe 90 seconds. When he hung up, some of the tension had left his shoulders. "He is coming, 20 minutes. We should clean these wounds so I do not look," he gestured at himself. "Like this." Courtney opened the first aid kit, pulling out antiseptic wipes and gauze. "You're going to need more than this. You need a hospital." "No hospitals. They ask questions. They report gunshot wounds." "I don't see any gunshot wounds." "Not yet." His smile was grim, "but the night is young." She started cleaning the cut above his eye, and he winced but didn't pull away. Up close, she could see the tattoos more clearly. Dragons, she'd been right about that, rendered in black and gray with touches of red. They wrapped around his neck like they were trying to strangle him, or protect him. She couldn't tell which. "What kind of syndicate?" she asked, dabbing at the blood. "The kind that does not answer questions from waitresses." "This waitress just saved your life." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something almost like respect there. "Yes, you did. Why?" "Because nobody deserves to die chained in a basement." "Many would disagree with you about that, especially regarding me." Before Courtney could respond, her window exploded inward. The sound came first, glass shattering, the sharp crack of gunfire, and then Sanchi was moving, faster than someone with his injuries should be able to move, tackling her off the futon and onto the floor behind the kitchenette counter. More shots punched through the wall above them, the plaster raining down in chunks. Her neighbors were screaming. Someone's car alarm started wailing in the parking lot below. Sanchi had his phone out again, screaming into it in Korean, his voice raw with rage. He hung up and looked at her, and there was something terrible in his eyes, not fear, fury. "It was Kwon," he said quietly. "My lieutenant, my friend, he tracked the phone, he sent them." "Your loyal friend." Courtney's voice came out higher than she intended, panic bleeding through. "The one you just called." "Yes," the word was bitter. 20 minutes, he said. They arrived in 8. He knew exactly where we were. Another burst of gunfire, closer now, from the hallway. Someone was coming up the stairs. Courtney's mind raced through impossible options. The window was 4 stories up. The door was the only exit. They were trapped. Sanchi was already moving toward her kitchen, yanking open drawers until he found her knife block. He pulled out the largest blade, tested its weight. "How attached are you to this apartment?" "What?" "The fire escape. Where is it?" "There isn't one. This building doesn't." But Sanchi was already at her bedroom window, the one that faced the alley, and he slammed his elbow through it. The glass spiderwebbed, and he kicked it out, the shards falling to the alley below. "We jump," he said. "That's 4 floors." "There is a dumpster. Aim for the dumpster." He was already climbing through, and Courtney heard the apartment door shaking, someone kicking it, the wood starting to splinter around the deadbolt. She looked at the door, looked at Sanchi disappearing through the window, thought about her security deposit, her lease, her entire life in this tiny box of an apartment. Then the door frame cracked and she was running for the window. Sanchi was hanging from the ledge, and he dropped just as she reached him. She heard him hit with a crash of metal and garbage bags. Then his face appeared in the dim light below, blood running from a fresh cut on his forehead. "Jump," he shouted. "Now." Behind her, the door burst open. Courtney didn't think. She climbed through the window, hung from the ledge for 1 heartbeat, and let go. Sanchi trusted his best friend, and that friend sent hitmen to kill him. If you believe loyalty is dead these days and you can't trust anyone, hit that subscribe button. Let's show the traitors we see them. The fall lasted forever and no time at all. Courtney hit the dumpster hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs, garbage bags cushioning her landing just enough to keep bones from breaking. She rolled sideways, gasping, and Sanchi's hand was already gripping her arm, hauling her up. "Move," he said, and they were running again. Her Civic was still in the lot where she'd left it, untouched by whatever hell had just torn through her apartment. She could hear sirens now, getting closer, and windows lighting up all through her building as neighbors called 911. Sanchi threw himself into the passenger seat, and Courtney started the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Where?" she asked, pulling out of the lot too fast, tires squealing. "Where do we go?" "Away from the city. He will have people watching every hotel, every..." "I'm not asking for ideas, I'm telling you I don't have any." Her voice cracked on the last word. She just jumped out of a 4th-story window. Her apartment was destroyed. Men with guns knew her face, her address, probably her name by now. Everything she owned was either shot full of holes or would be seized as evidence. "I don't have money for a hotel anyway. I don't have money for anything. I have $300 and whatever's in my gas tank." Sanchi looked at her, and she could see him recalculating, adjusting to the reality that she wasn't some wealthy Good Samaritan who could just disappear to a vacation home. She was a waitress with a negative net worth who'd made the worst decision of her life in an abandoned basement. "Family?" he asked. "Friends outside the city?" Courtney's mind went blank for a moment, panic eating up her ability to think. Then it landed on the one place nobody would think to look because nobody ever wanted to go there. "My aunt. She's about 2 hours east. The Hollows." "What is the Hollows?" "You'll see." She drove, out of downtown, onto the interstate, putting miles between them and the city while Sanchi sat silent beside her, one hand pressed against his ribs where she suspected he had more injuries than just the visible ones. Every pair of headlights behind them made her stomach clench. Every exit made her wonder if they should take it, lose themselves in back roads and small towns. But gas cost money, and she didn't have money to waste getting lost. The Hollows announced itself long before they arrived. First the billboards disappeared, then the streetlights grew sparse, then the road itself got rougher, potholes appearing like wounds in the asphalt. Courtney took the exit onto Route 47, and the city skyline vanished behind them, swallowed by darkness and distance. "This is where you are from?" Sanchi asked as they passed a shuttered gas station with plywood over the windows. "Born and raised until I was 16. Then my mom got a job in the city and we left." She didn't mention that her mom had called it escaping, that she'd made Courtney promise never to come back here, to make something of herself, to break the cycle. That promise felt pretty broken right now. The Hollows proper started where the pavement turned to patched asphalt and gravel. Houses appeared, small and sagging, many with tarps on the roofs or cars on blocks in the yards. Chain-link fences, boarded windows. Hand-painted signs advertising tax preparation and hair braiding out of living rooms. A corner store with bars on the windows and a hand-lettered sign that said no loitering. Courtney saw Sanchi taking it in, his expression carefully neutral. She wondered what he was thinking, if he'd ever been anywhere like this, if he knew places like this existed outside of movies and news reports about poverty statistics. "How much further?" he asked. "2 more blocks." She turned onto Carmichael Street, and the houses got even smaller, most of them shotgun style with peeling paint and front porches that tilted at angles gravity shouldn't allow. Dogs barked from behind fences. A group of young men stood on a corner despite the late hour, watching her car pass with eyes that missed nothing. Aunt Diane's house was the 4th one on the left, painted a yellow that had faded to the color of old newspaper. The porch light was on, which meant her aunt was still awake, probably watching one of her church programs or working on the word searches she bought in bulk from the dollar store. Courtney pulled into the dirt driveway and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence felt heavy, full of everything they weren't saying about how badly this had all gone wrong. "Your aunt," Sanchi said carefully. "She will not call the police when she sees me. She'll have questions, a lot of questions, but no, she won't call the cops." Courtney looked at him, at his expensive watch and his blood-soaked designer shirt and his tattoos that screamed organized crime. "You're going to have to tell her something close to the truth. She's old, but she's not stupid, and she's seen enough in her life that you can't shock her." "What will you tell her?" "That I helped someone and it went bad. That we need somewhere to stay for a few days until we figure out what to do next." Courtney opened her door and the reality of what she'd just said hit her. A few days. Like this was temporary. Like she could go back to her life after this. And Sanchi, in there you're not a crime boss or syndicate leader or whatever you are. You're just someone who needed help, because that's all my aunt will care about. He nodded slowly, and Courtney saw something shift in his expression. Not agreement exactly, more like adaptation, like he was putting on a different face for a different audience. They got out of the car, and the night air was different here, thicker somehow, carrying the smell of overdue rain and distant industrial runoff from the old textile mills. Courtney's feet felt heavy climbing the 3 steps to her aunt's porch. She raised her hand to knock, and the door opened before her knuckles touched wood. Aunt Diane stood in the doorway in her housecoat, her reading glasses pushed up into her gray hair, taking in Courtney's torn uniform and Sanchi's blood-stained shirt with eyes that had seen wars and funerals and everything in between. "Lord have mercy," she said quietly. "Baby girl, what have you done?" Aunt Diane didn't ask questions that first night. She just pointed Sanchi toward the bathroom with a stack of towels and pointed Courtney toward the kitchen table with a look that said they'd be talking later. By the time Sanchi emerged 20 minutes later, the water in the pipes groaning from the effort, Aunt Diane had laid out clothes on the couch. A pair of Uncle Raymond's old work pants and a plain gray t-shirt from back when he'd been alive and working at the bottling plant. Sanchi stood in the doorway holding the clothes like they might bite him. Courtney could see him processing the faded fabric, the frayed hem on the shirt, the way the pants had been patched at the knee with a square of different denim. These weren't fashion statement distressed. They were just worn out. "The shirt might be tight," Aunt Diane said from the kitchen where she was heating up something on the stove. "Raymond was a smaller man, but it's clean." "Thank you," Sanchi said, and disappeared back into the bathroom. When he emerged again, Courtney had to stop herself from starring. Gone was the crime lord in the blood-soaked designer shirt. In his place was just a man, lean and dangerous-looking still, but ordinary in a way that made the tattoos on his neck stand out even more. The pants were too short, showing his ankles. The shirt stretched tight across his shoulders. He looked stripped down, vulnerable. Aunt Diane set bowls on the table, white rice with butter, and a can of beans heated through, the kind of meal you made when it was late and money was tight and you had to feed people anyway. She added a plate of saltines and 3 glasses of tap water. Courtney saw Sanchi looking at the food, and she couldn't read his expression. He sat down slowly, like he wasn't sure of the protocol. "We say grace in this house," Aunt Diane said, reaching for Courtney's hand on one side and Sanchi's on the other. His fingers were stiff in hers, uncertain. "Lord, thank you for this food and for bringing these children here safely. Watch over them and guide their steps. Amen." "Amen," Courtney echoed. Sanchi said nothing. They ate in silence. Courtney was too exhausted to taste anything, shoveling rice and beans into her mouth mechanically. But she watched Sanchi take his first bite, saw the pause as he processed what he was eating. Not bad food, exactly, just simple, plain. The kind of food where you tasted every ingredient because there were only 3 of them. In Korea, he said quietly, my grandmother made rice every day, just rice, sometimes with kimchi, sometimes with nothing. He took another bite. I had forgotten. Aunt Diane nodded like this made perfect sense. Funny how we forget where we came from when life gets comfortable. After dinner, Aunt Diane made up the couch for Sanchi with sheets that had been washed so many times they were soft as cloth. Courtney took the spare room, the one that still had her cousin Marcus's old posters on the wall from before he'd gotten locked up 3 years ago. She lay in the dark listening to the house settle, the sounds so different from her apartment. No traffic noise, just crickets and the occasional dog barking, and somewhere far off, music playing from someone's porch. She must have slept because she woke to sunlight coming through thin curtains and voices in the kitchen. When she stumbled out, Sanchi was sitting at the table with a cup of instant coffee, watching Aunt Diane fry eggs in a pan so old the Teflon was mostly a memory. Morning, baby, Aunt Diane said. I was just telling your friend here that if he's staying, he's helping. I got gutters that need cleaning and a back step that's coming loose. Sanchi looked at Courtney like she might translate this into something that made sense in his world. She just shrugged. Welcome to the Hollows. Nobody gets a free ride. After breakfast, Courtney walked him outside to show him around, though there wasn't much to show. Aunt Diane's house was on a block of identical shotgun houses, all of them slowly surrendering to entropy. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson was sitting on her porch in a wheelchair. An oxygen tank beside her. 2 doors down, the Martinez family had their front yard full of car parts, a engine block sitting on a tarp, while Mr. Martinez and his teenage son worked on it with tools that looked older than Courtney. Good morning, Diane's niece, Mrs. Patterson called out, waving. You home for a visit? Yes, ma'am, just for a few days. That's nice. You bring your boyfriend. She was squinting at Sanchi with open curiosity. Just a friend, Courtney said quickly. Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested she'd believe that when she saw evidence otherwise. Well, you tell your aunt I still got those green beans I put up. She wants some, she just got to come get them. They walked further down the block, and Sanchi stayed quiet, but Courtney could feel him observing everything. The house where someone had tried to start a garden in the front yard, the plants struggling in hard-packed dirt. The corner store with the bars on the windows, and a sign advertising CHECKS, CASHED, and WIC accepted. The bus stop where 3 people waited even though the bus only came twice a day, and neither time was convenient for anyone who actually had a job to get to. How long have these people lived like this? Sanchi asked finally. Forever, probably. This neighborhood's been poor since before I was born, before my aunt was born, probably. They passed a woman walking with 2 small children, the kids wearing clothes that were clean but clearly hand-me-downs, sizes that didn't quite fit. The woman nodded at them, tired eyes missing nothing about Sanchi's unfamiliar face. In the city, Sanchi said slowly, there are restaurants where one meal costs $500. I have eaten at these restaurants. I have not thought about it. Well, here $500 is rent money, or medicine money, or the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark. They reached the corner where the young men Courtney had seen last night were still posted up, different guys but same energy. One of them nodded at her, recognition, local seeing local. They looked at Sanchi with more suspicion, clocking his tattoos, his foreignness, trying to figure out what he was doing here. Those men, Sanchi said when they'd passed, they are dealers. Probably. Not much else to do around here that pays. What do they sell? Courtney looked at him. Why, you thinking of buying? No, I am thinking. He stopped walking, standing in the middle of the cracked sidewalk like he'd been hit by something he couldn't see. I know what they sell. I know because my organization manufactures it. The synthetic compounds. We sell to distributors who sell to dealers who sell here. He was staring at his hands like they were covered in something he couldn't wash off. I have never seen where it ends up. A school bus rumbled past, ancient and yellow, and through the windows Courtney could see kids in clothes that had been washed too many times, carrying backpacks that had been taped and patched. Going to schools that probably didn't have enough books or working heat or teachers who got paid enough to care. Sanchi, Courtney said quietly, welcome to where your money comes from. Sanchi is seeing how the other half lives for the first time. It's unfair that some have billions while others can't afford bread. If you're tired of the rich ignoring the poor, comment, change the system below. The kids showed up on the third day, when Sanchi was on Aunt Diane's porch fixing the railing with wood screws and a drill so old it sounded like it might give up at any moment. Courtney was inside helping her aunt sort through medical bills, trying to figure out which ones could be paid and which ones would have to wait another month. She heard the voice first, young and jittery, talking too fast. Yo, Miss Diane got any work? I can take out trash, sweep, whatever. Just need like $20, maybe $30. Courtney looked out through the screen door and saw him. Maybe 17, maybe 20. Hard to tell because addiction aged people in ways that had nothing to do with years. He was skinny in a way that said he forgot to eat, his clothes hanging off him, his skin ashy and dull. But it was his hands that told the real story, the way they wouldn't stay still, picking at his arms, tapping against his thighs, fingers moving in constant nervous rhythm. Sanchi had stopped drilling. He was staring at the kid with an expression Courtney couldn't quite read. Marcus, Aunt Diane called from inside, her voice gentle but firm. You know I don't have work today, and even if I did, I'd need you clear-headed for it. I am clear-headed, Miss Diane. I'm good. I'm real good. But his eyes were wrong, pupils too wide, and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot like standing still caused him physical pain. When's the last time you ate something? I ate breakfast. The lie was obvious in the way he said it, too quick, too defensive. Aunt Diane sighed and Courtney heard her moving in the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came to the door with a paper plate covered in foil, leftover chicken and rice from last night. Here, take this home to your grandmother. And Marcus, that clinic on 5th Street, they got programs, free programs. I don't need no program, Miss Diane. I'm good. I just need. He took the plate, but his hands were shaking so badly Courtney thought he might drop it. I just need to get right, you know. Just need to get right and then I'll be good. He left, walking too fast, that jerky momentum of someone being chased by something invisible. Courtney watched him turn the corner and disappear, and when she looked back at Sanchi, he was still frozen, the drill hanging loose in his hand. You know him? She asked, stepping onto the porch. No, his voice was quiet, but I know what he is using. How can you tell? The pupils, the movement patterns, the way he cannot stop touching himself. Sanchi set the drill down carefully, like he didn't trust himself to hold it anymore. It is called Blue Heaven on the streets. We manufacture it in labs outside the city. Very pure, very addictive, very cheap to make. He looked at his hands again, that same gesture he'd been making since they got here, like he could see blood on them that wouldn't wash off. We sell it for profit. Maximum addiction, maximum return. Courtney sat down on the steps, suddenly needing to not be standing. You made that, what he's on. My organization makes it. I approved the formula. I signed off on the distribution networks. He said it flatly, like he was reading from a report. It was good business. The margins were exceptional. That kid is someone's grandson, someone's son. Yes, the word came out barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a long moment, the afternoon sun beating down on the porch, the sound of kids playing basketball somewhere down the block filtering through the air. Normal sounds. Life continuing like it always did in places where people didn't have the luxury of stopping. How old were you when you started? Courtney asked finally. 16. My father died, left debts. I paid them the only way I could. He was staring at the house across the street, where Mr. Martinez was still working on that engine, his son handing him tools. I told myself I was surviving. Then I told myself I was building an empire. I never told myself I was killing people like that boy. But you knew. I knew the numbers. Addiction rates, overdose statistics, market penetration. I knew it academically. He turned to look at her, and there was something broken in his eyes. I did not know it like this. I did not know his name is Marcus and his grandmother is waiting for him to come home and eat chicken. Aunt Diane came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at Sanchi for a long moment, and Courtney could see her aunt doing what she always did, reading people, seeing past the surface to whatever truth they were carrying. That boy's been struggling for 2 years now, Aunt Diane said, settling into her chair with the grunt of someone whose knees didn't work like they used to. Started when his mama died and he couldn't handle the grief. First it was pills, then it was whatever he could get. Now it's that blue stuff. Gets it from those boys on the corner. The ones who work for distributors, Sanchi said. Who work for regional managers, who work for people like me. So you're in that business. Aunt